Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us to another session of our collaboration series, Future-Proof Your Business. It's a gorgeous day outside, so I hope that you're enjoying it. My name is Susana Marambio. I'm the co-owner of BBCS Business Advisors. We help business owners to accelerate the growth by providing them with the structure, the knowledge, and the tools they need to achieve their goals. This session is being recorded and streamed live on LinkedIn. The session is going to be around 45 minutes, but please feel free to ask questions along the way. Anyway, at the end of the session, we will allow some time for a Q&A. So just to give you a little bit of background, we launched this collaboration series in 2023 by business owners for business owners, with the goal of addressing the real challenges that we see every day when we are talking with our clients. The idea is to bring experts so that they can share their knowledge, and the clear focus is providing practical tips so that you can put into action straight away. We know that your time is valuable, and just being here, we know it is already a big ask. So we are not going to try to sell you anything, and we are not going to spend a lot of time talking about ourselves. The title of today's webinar is People Pressures, What Irish Employers Must Get Right in 2025. Employee disputes, WRC claims, underperformance issues, and difficulties retaining key talent are increasingly common. The landscape has shifted, so must we do the same. Our guest today is someone who truly understands this landscape. Maura Hurley is the founder of People Solutions Limited. She brings 25 years of HR experience empowering SMEs with tailored solutions. She specializes on leadership training and coaching, HR department setting, and compliance, all aimed at fostering and thriving a workplace cultures. Her guiding principle is very simple. When people flourish, business prospers. So Maura, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I'm delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. So to start, could you please share a little bit about you, your journey, your company?
Yes, so as you say, it's going on 25 years of my time in working in HR. So I started in 1999, which makes me sound ancient. And I have dedicated my entire professional career to HR since then. So I started from a work placement from UL. I got into HR department, got really great experience, and knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my days after that. So I went back and I finished my degree. And since then, I've worked in HR full time. And I knew I wanted to be a HR manager from the very first time I was working in HR. And that's what I went after. And I was fortunate that I've had really broad roles. And that when I started working in HR, I started at the beginning of the time where the company wants to invest in HR. So I set up each of the functions that I've worked in as an employee, and then ran the function and developed it over time. And it was really rewarding work. I loved it. And then over a year ago, I decided I would go out on my own and I suppose just work with more organizations, some of it for the challenge, but also I really love just focusing on SMEs. And I can do that by working for myself. So yeah, I'm a year down the road working for myself, and so far so good. My focus in my work is giving organizations, SMEs, personal service, and that's the feedback I've gotten from people so far. Is it's great to have a local person or a face-to-face person when you have an issue, and yeah, so it's going well.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you. So as a background for the people on the webinar, so when we were preparing with Maura for this discussion, we identified that there were so many topics, important topics that we should touch on. So we'll try to cover as many topics as possible. We will never gonna manage to go through them in 45 minutes. But I will ask a lot of questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A. And if you have more questions, just at the end of the session, I'll share the details from Maura so that you can contact her, okay? So at BBC, we work closely with leadership teams across various sectors. And beside all the rising costs and the uncertainty, a topic that comes up again and again is how difficult it is to get and keep the right staff in the company. Something that is very concerning as well is the rise of WRS claims. So that is Workplace Relationship Commission claims. There's been an increase of 11% from 2023 to 2024, to be exact. So Maura, what are you seeing in the market that's driving this sharp rise, and how can SMEs reduce their exposure?
So for just, I suppose, on the stats for WRC, we're always a year behind. And it's around this time of the year, usually in May, they'll release their report that will give all their volumes and all the details of the volumes as well. So where is increasing specifically in relation to claims. So we'll go on last year's report, and on that percentage increase, when you look into that in a bit more detail, you see that the increase really is driven by increases in equality cases. So that means cases under the discriminatory criteria. So basically there's nine discrimination areas, and we've seen really big increases in 6 of those 9. And within that, we've seen increases like of 100% and more than 100% increases in relation to claims under disability, sexual orientation, sexual harassment in particular, and age, I think, was the other one that was really, really high. So that's where we're seeing I suppose, a lot of the increases. And also there's a lot of increases from that report. We see increases in relation to protected disclosures. So that's asking people to sign confidentiality clauses or non-disclosure agreements. So I suppose then we have to say what's driving that. And we don't know with absolute certainty what it is, but we can take very educated guesses on it. When we see that it's in relation to discrimination, we know that employees, and particularly employees of certain generations, are really, really aware of their rights when it comes to discrimination. And a very strong part of their values is being treated fairly. And so there's a little bit of a generation shift in that, I think, from like the millennials and Gen Zers to maybe the older generations. And the value is, if you're not treated well, you don't stand for it. So I think that is driving it in one sense. And then the employment, I suppose, the area of employment law is changing and evolving constantly. And it's a full-time job in itself to keep up with that. And if you're a business owner, your role is so broad and you've so much responsibilities, and you're investing a lot of your time and your commitment in growing the business, developing in operations. It's hard to keep up with legislation and compliance. And of that group of business owners, there is always and will always be a certain percentage of those who have a high risk tolerance. And that's okay if you have 1 or 2 staff, maybe it's a risk you're willing to take. But when your business is growing and then you have 10 and 12 staff, you're really more exposure there. And it's when do you draw the line to say, now I need to invest in doing things right from our people perspective and getting really good contracts and policies, etc. So from what I can see, it's a combination of those things at play. But anecdotally, even though we don't have the actual stats for 2024 yet, from what I'm hearing and seeing is there is a very high volume of claims going through the WRC in relation to discrimination and employment equality again for the last year. So we'll see. In about a month, we'll know for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically, as an answer to the how can SMEs reduce their exposure is basically getting policies and contracts in place to make sure that they are managing their stuff right from the beginning. Wouldn't that?
Yeah, for sure. And in relation to that discrimination case and the equality rise in cases. The WRC actually gave a recommendation and advice to employers in their last report. They don't do it that much, but that advice was having the respect at work policy in place and training all staff, but particular training for managers. So that's the key part in the area we know risk is growing. That's the key action to take. And when it comes to unfair dismissals, which is always a steady flow going, it is specifically a really robust disciplinary procedure and a grievance procedure. So those three are their key documents with a good contract. So there you have the basics set up for those.
Okay, so I will go with a follow-up question then. So when an employer is facing an unfair dismissal claim, what's the best course of action? And for your experience, what documents are absolutely critical in defending such a cases?
If you get a letter from the WRC for an unfair dismissal case, you've already lost.
Ooh.
Because you now, regardless of the outcome of that, you now have to pay for somebody to prepare a submission for that hearing, and you have to pay for somebody to represent you at that hearing, and you have to pay probably senior managers time to be prepared and attend the hearing as well.
Wow.
So when I'm working with organizations, we're working on the premise that the documentation that the employee will have when they leave the organization, if they bring it to somebody for advice, like an employment solicitor or whoever, they will say, no, your case isn't very strong. So that's what we're working towards. You're not working for the response when you get it.
Okay.
And for that to happen, for that employment solicitor to say, that's not a very strong case, you can take it, but the chances are against you, put somebody off, then you will need, again, back to the strong contract, the disciplinary procedure, and then it's all about your documentation and detailed, robust documents that showed you followed a fair procedure and that your decision was proportionate to the crime, in inverted commas, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's what it is. And for each disciplinary policy, there's really important principles of natural justice. And that is that everybody's entitled to a fair hearing. So that means they have all the information up front, for example, there's no surprises. And they have the opportunity to present their case and respond and reply to that at each stage. They have the opportunity to be represented at each meeting, that there's notes of each meeting taken, and that they have the right to appeal.
Okay, and this is both, no, for the employer and the employee. So both have this exactly the same right.
Yeah. But it's important for the employee when, if they've ultimately dismissed or they feel they've been constructively dismissed, that your documentation and your process shows that you've upheld those principles.
Okay. So I want to clarify that we assume that relationship between employers and employees is always based on respect. And these kind of cases, when it happens not because we on purpose triggering this situation. So these are situations that happens because miscommunication or any other lack of training and so on. So one question. So if before we reach that stage that you receive a letter, when an employee is underperforming or causing disruptions, because it could be that they're doing a good job, but they are causing disruption, what is the right process for managing the situation? Also thinking that the employer make an investment when you bring someone into the organization. So you don't want to lose that investment. You don't want to go look for someone else if the person is a good one. And so the question, what is the right process for managing the situation fairly? And how can we prove underperformance objectively? Because you mentioned that there has to be a detailed documentation that the decision is fair.
So to answer that question, you have to consider if that employee is on their probationary period or if they're outside their probationary period. If they're still within a probationary period, and it will almost always now be 6 months, there's restrictions on extending probationary periods now, then you'll follow a probationary review process. So you don't get into disciplinary at that point, which is a lot easier. It's a much more straightforward process. And you'll review the person's performance at intervals, at a minimum of, say, every 3 months, if all is going well. If it's not going well, more often than that. And it's all about open and honest feedback and communication with the intention of bringing the person to the desired standard, not with the intention of getting them out the door ASAP. So I think keeping it simple and but it is absolutely necessary to have a form to guide those feedback conversations, because you do need to record in what way in particular the person is, as you're saying, is disruptive. So maybe behavioral issues or standard issues or whatever it is, you do need to document it and give examples, and you can't argue with data. So that's the approach you'll take with it. And you'll give them the training and ask them for their feedback on it and what do they need to get to that standard, but it is necessary to get to that standard. And with that cooperative approach for 6 months and they're still not there, you make the decision that they failed their probation. And you document it through a fairly simple probationary review form. You will always give them the right to appeal that. That's fine. There's a very low take-up of appeal in a fail of probation.
Okay. So what happened if I became disruptive after past my
That's much more complex and more challenging for the organization to manage. And one of the key things there is whether they have less than 12 months service or more than 12 months service. If they have more than 12 months service, they can take an unfair dismissals claim, and the duty is on the employer to prove that it was fair, not on the employee to prove that it was unfair. So you're back to your documentation now.
Okay. So, and because something that we see normally, you hire someone, at the beginning it's going well, unless that it goes very wrong at the beginning. At the beginning, we give all this space to someone to make mistakes, to learn, to basically to get to know each other. No?
Yeah.
So, but something that we see normally is that employers, because they're too busy, or because they don't have a structured way of really this shadowing, they are teaching the teams by shadowing. Follow me and see how I do things. So they don't have a process to actually ask for feedback from the employee, give feedback from the employer to them. So normally the 6 months pass and they don't actually have managed any of this communication.
Yeah.
So basically, am I correct to say that in order that the employer can prove underperformance objectively, they really have to start from the beginning. It's not something that they can backtrack. They need to, when someone comes to work with them, they need to put everything in place from day one.
Ideally, yeah. And then you can demonstrate a fair procedure. It's really difficult to demonstrate a fair procedure if you decide at 10 months they've got no feedback, and you decide at 10 months, no, they're never going to be good enough for the job, or they're not a good match to the organization. And it could be the case. You can make the decision, but it's not a very fair procedure followed at that stage. And again, your risks are much lower because they have 11 months and not 12 months. But I suppose treating people fairly is a way to create a good work environment. And all of your staff are constantly looking at what's happening, and they're always judging in some way whether people are being treated fairly. And if they see people treated fairly, they feel they are, and if not, then it could be me. And it creates the culture that it certainly contributes to the culture of your organization. So doing it right is important. If it happens that and it's really, really common that it just slides on, and the next thing they're 18 months, and really, if you had looked at it in detail along that time, you would have made the decision that wasn't a right fit. Now you have to invest a fair amount of time and effort into managing that situation. And that is back to feedback. If you have built in just a system of giving feedback to people at intervals like 6 months and setting goals, then you'll start doing it through that system.
Wow.
If you don't, then you still need to give feedback before you make a decision, unless they do something that would constitute gross misconduct and you have a strong disciplinary procedure there to guide your actions in managing it.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about PIPs or performance improvement plans. So we know what it is because we work in corporate organizations and probably, unfortunately, have to put them in place at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe we can start with explaining what they are.
Yeah.
So if you can explain what the
Yeah.
performance plan is.
So a PIP is called a performance improvement plan. And it's for when you realize that there's a staff member whose standards or conduct or quality of work is below the standard required. And it's a process that you put in place to bring them up to the standard that is required. And ideally, sometimes it's called maximizing there's other names, it could be called maximizing your performance. Ideally, it's set out in a policy, those steps, and it will be linked to the disciplinary process because there's a point in time where if performance improvement or conduct is not improving, that it will link into the various phases of disciplinary action.
Okay, so how do we structure a PIP, a performance improvement plan, to ensure that it's fair, but also that the employer is legally protected, so that basically I'm ticking the box that I need to take to make sure that both things.
So again, it's about documenting it. I think number one, having your policy written out in advance is a really good start because you'll give that to the employee and you explain it and you'll explain the process. And it's generally, it will be, and again, unless circumstances will vary, and if conduct is deemed to be gross misconduct, you'll veer off your PIP. But let's say it's just a continuous quality of work issue. It will be a phased approach. And the first meeting, it's open and honest feedback on the performance with examples, information, data backing up what you're saying. Now, and take the opportunity at that stage. Nobody is all negative in their performance. There's always something, and it is worth mentioning it because the impression will be, and it's important, is that it's a fair process, that it's not a witch hunt or an attack or a tool to get somebody out the door.
Yeah.
And then you set performance standards and matrix and criteria that they need to reach, and you set a time frame for that to happen, and you ask them what supports they need to get there, and you provide those supports if it's reasonable to provide those supports.
Yeah, I think that one point of this is employees know that performance improvement plans means, so they know that they are something at their fault, and that in theory, when I have to do it, I try to, this is to help you. But it's very possible that people are going to be in an emotional state that they will not get it in that way. And that means extra work and extra effort for the employer to really make the positive impression, because it could be very wrong if you are in the defensive as a manager or the employer, if you're in the defensive position, because for the employee it's a very, very stressful and painful place to be, isn't it?
It's a really tough process. It's very, very difficult for an employee to go through that. And it's very difficult for an employer as well, or a manager. It's very, very time consuming. And it's a very tough process because everybody knows that a very strong possibility of an outcome is that somebody's going to lose their job. And often what we see happening is, and especially if they're done well, with the intention of helping and supporting the person to improve, and both parties are making an effort to get there, and it's not happening. Often what happens is the person will resign through the process. because it may then be clear to them that actually it's not the right job for me, it's not the right fit, it's not the right organization. So that can happen, and that's okay, because everybody has the opportunity to do that, but you do still need to be able to demonstrate that they were afforded fairness through the process.
Okay, so we're going to move to a different topic. And this is something that is affecting nearly every business in all the industries today, is talent retention. So
Yeah.
Ireland, it is an point that there is a full employment. So which are the best strategies that SMEs can use or are using to hold on to their best people?
Yeah, it's a big struggle, and it's not just in SMEs, it's across the board. But sometimes as an SME owner, we kind of feel like we're in the back foot because maybe our budget for benefits isn't as big as a bigger company in the area. And it's not always about that. So I think as an SME, you have huge advantage as an employer. Aside from the practical things like people working for SMEs have generally shorter commutes and broader roles, there's a really important element for everybody in the workforce is the sense of belonging and being appreciated and contributing and seeing your contribution in the work as well. And an SME has an advantage there, as far as I'm concerned. Number one, there's no cost to it. And number two, because there's less people, the connections and the relationships can be stronger. So you can very easily foster that sense of belonging and appreciation. And the advantage for the SME is that SMEs are more agile and they can move way faster. So if your priority is, I want to keep my key people, you find out, is this a good place to work? If you don't know that, your turnover will be one indication, but just ask people, what is it that's good about working here and what is it that isn't as good about working here? And you can, because of the agility of an SME, you can create a culture of a nice place to work relatively quickly compared to the bureaucratic layers of a corporate world. So it's to know that and to maximize that as an SME owner, I think is the big thing. I think the broad roles, and I think it's coming back to, and anybody who knows me professionally will have heard this so many times from me. Again, that is coming back to the honest, authentic and good intentioned conversations of performance review, because in that conversation the employee will be talking as much as you'll be asking for their honesty, and if they're telling you what it is, about a role or where they want to go career progression, there's a lot about an SME that you can be flexible enough to give that if it's your key person. So it's really back to those open, honest conversations with integrity. And if you're giving that as an employer, you'll get that back from your employees, and you'll be able to just create a workplace where people want to stay and prosper and thrive, and then your business will.
Very good question. So I want to go back a little bit to the previous topic. We have a question. So where two employees start at the same time, but one is progressing at a faster pace, how can managers effectively recognize and support the high-performing employee without creating an environment of favoritism?
Good question. I think both employees have to, it's really about a feeling, isn't it? And both employees have to feel like their manager has been respectful in their communication. There's no point in telling the employee who's not progressing at the same pace that they are when it's not the case. People see through that type of, trying to keep somebody sweet or whatever it might be. So I think you have to have like that honest intention with both people, and have those conversations and highlight for each of them where they're good and where there's areas for improvement or development. And regardless of their length of service, that's good conversation will be really different for everyone. But it is important to have a perception of fairness. So if the person who's not performing as well feels like there's favoritism, have the conversation and tell them how and why. And sometimes it's even by having that conversation and giving them the opportunity to voice it and actually really listening. And even if you're not agreeing with them, let them say, let them have their say and have it, continue with the conversation after they really feel like they voiced it. And explain your actions and ask them what will help them to feel more valued, etc. Then they should feel better about it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. If please, the person who has a question, Connor, if you want to ask a follow-up question, just feel free to put it in the Q&A. So another question, you touched very briefly in the previous answer about flexible working. So this is stayed here and hybrid, and it's making a lot of problems for smaller and medium businesses. So how can we balance employee expectations with the realities of running a business?
Yeah, this comes up a lot. It's a hot topic, possibly because of the changes that we're seeing in the bigger corporate world of the multinational techs and stuff like that, as well as having an influence on it. As an employer, I think that at a basic level, what you need to be aware of is an employee has a right to request flexible working arrangements and remote working, particularly where it refers to care of a person. So that's their right, and that piece of legislation came in at the end of 2023, and I think there's 7 or 8 cases under that have been referred to the WRC, and the employer does not have to agree to that remote working request, but they have to demonstrate that they've given it fair consideration and have logical, practical reasons for denying it, if that's what they choose to do. So that's just at the minimum, that's what you have to do. And that's a key thing to know, rather than answering quickly and not, going through that process. And then after that, my view on it is a benefit that's really valued by people, and not just certain demographics, across the board. And I know the challenge that small business owners and business owners will say is productivity is not as good when people are working remotely. And my experience of that is, if you have a worker who has high work standards and work ethic, wherever they work, that's going to remain. Whether they're working at home, in another country, or in your workplace. And in fact, sometimes it can be higher when they work remotely because of the value, the flexibility. If you have a worker who doesn't have that same standard or work ethic, then they need to be managed. Their performance needs to be managed very closely if you're allowing a trial, for example, of remote working. But that should be done when they're in the workplace too. So what you're monitoring really should be the output, as opposed to kind of looking busy, sitting there looking for that presentism type of thing. That's getting outdated. And what people are realizing is the important thing is measure the output.
Yeah, I think also a point to make is that flexible working is not only about hybrid working or remote working. It is about allowing people. There are people that can work until 3 in the afternoon, and then the children's, and they provide the dinner, and they can work the rest of hours at night. Some people that can work longer days, and they want one day off. So there is a mix of what flexible working is, and depending on the results that you require for them, probably you actually had more options to do it than what you think if you are thinking on flexible working only as remote working, people not coming.
There's loads of variations, and it depends on what suits the person. Again, it's a really good idea to have a policy and set out what you're going to do with it. Like, as a basics, you have to consider it. But a good way to start is on a trial and measuring the output on it. But from talking to a lot of smaller business owners and the employees, the amount of times that people say to me, an employee says to me, I really appreciate that I can do this or I can do that. I can drop my kids from school and then I can do that, or I can take a break. All of those flexibility, different types of flexibilities that you mentioned there. And another type of flexibility is if a staff member is going through a difficult phase of their life for whatever reason that is, illness or bereavement or anything in between, where you offer flexibility, the amount of times, whether it was last year or 5 years ago, people would say, and I really appreciate that when my mom was sick, that I was given the flexibility. People don't forget it, and you kind of get what you give in a way with that as well. And again, it's creating the culture, and people are seeing what's happening. So my advice is like disregard it at your peril. We're in today's labor market. Um, it's obviously an employee's market. Turnover is so high. It's a wonderful benefit for people, and it's not expensive, but you do need to monitor productivity if you're implementing it, and trial it, and have a policy on it.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions to that one. One is from someone in the audience. So what should be included in a flexible working policy to avoid misunderstanding?
Yeah, a lot. It's going to be detailed.
Hire someone to write it for you, please.
Yeah, they're pretty, I think if it's good, it's detailed. It will explain the process for applying at a basic level. It will give a list of all the different types of flexibilities. Like you said there, Suzanne, it's not just hybrid working. It can be so many other things. And then it will give all your rules around it. So, for example, that it can be taken away if you find X, Y, and Z, that it's not an indefinite benefit just because you've had it for a certain length of time, that if and this changes, that it won't always continue on. There'll be a big part on health and safety, because you're responsible for their work space, even though they're working from their home. There'll be a section on confidentiality, on IT security. So there's a lot of considerations, and yeah, it's good to, I suppose, nail your colors to the post on all of that straight off so that everybody's clear on it.
Okay, and then something that you mentioned before, that you talk about the performance, that you need to know what is the performance that you want to get out of the results that you want from each of the employees, so that it's going to be easier and more fair to measure it is working or not, the productivity. So my next question is performance management. So what framework work best? And so just to make sure that it is, again, the process that is manageable, because we are small businesses, so there is a lot of work. And second, that is fair, because we don't want people to see it as a punishment. We want to see it as a tool to do a better job.
Yeah. So the number one thing, generally, managers are reluctant to do this for various reasons. Do you find that as well?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The time that we asked people, so do you, that these people, they don't want to do the work, they are lazy, they don't want to come. And then when was the last time that you have a performance review with them? Well, never, but we meet every week to discuss the work that we do. Is that, yeah, but performance
Totally different.
about themselves is about how they feel, how they're working, nothing to do with the tasks that they need.
Yeah. So to set yourself up for success, number one, just commit to the time. It does take time, and it does take effort. And you know, if you want to reap the rewards of it, and there are many, then accept that. And the next thing is your intention. If you're doing it because Susanna said you have to, or my business network are telling me this is the thing to do, I better do it, don't bother, because you're not going to get really much quality out of it. Do it with the intention of actually giving good feedback and actually asking for good feedback in return. Then you're on the right track.
Okay.
And then, as you say, so this is the big temptation when it comes to performance review discussions in SMEs, in all contexts, but particularly in SMEs, is that we're so comfortable every day talking about operational stuff. And it is connected to the conversation that we'll just, no matter what the intention, we'll just get into that operational conversation. And because we're not used to those kind of feedback and honest and a little bit vulnerable conversations, we'll just shy away from it, and it won't be quality.
Yeah. So I have a question, another question from the audience. In your experience, what is the optimal frequency for reviewing and updating a work from home or any policy by maintaining the integrity of the policy?
How often should you review policies?
Yeah, the frequency to reviewing them and updating them. So the work from home or any other one to maintaining the integrity of it.
It really depends on the policy and what legislative changes there's been in relation to that topic. And then you'll give yourself, so let's say you do a flexible working policy. It's very reasonable to give it at least 6 months to see how it's practically being applied and how good and robust it is. You could also give it a year. You don't want to be doing them too often, or you're definitely not doing them for the sake of doing them. Just do them when there's a genuine need to change something in it. So I would say you'd look at it every year, but you mightn't update it every year, and update it if either one, there's a legislative change relation to it, or you see from practice some part of it's not working very well.
Yeah,
so I can't give a 6 months or 1 year, but look at it at a 12 months time, and don't update it then unless it needs to be updated.
Yeah, one of the experience that I had is people working with organizations like yours, so like external HR or consultancy. It is that you will proactively go to the business owners to say there was this change in the legislation and you need to update this part of your policies because now it's relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So 2 more questions and we have 3 minutes. So the first one, it is, normally when you are as a business owner, you move from what you're doing the work and helping people to do the work to become the leader of the organization. So many times it could be that it's your first time being a manager.
Yeah.
What kind of leadership training should they be considering to handle people management more efficiently?
Yeah, it's a really good question. People often get promoted because they're good at the job, and then it's assumed that they're going to be a good manager, but they're completely different skill sets. And the foundation of a strong leader for me is strong emotional intelligence and a growth mindset. And I know that word emotional intelligence is thrown around a lot, and a lot of people don't know what it actually means. So it means their self-awareness and their self-regulation, social awareness, social regulation, and their motivation. So it really means how aware they are of themselves and how they can, their impulse control, how they can control and manage themselves, and the same of people, how they can read people, situations, read a room, and how they can influence that. So there's kind of divided into two. There's you and the people, and motivation is a big underpin of all of that. So if you're going to invest in your managers, invest in their emotional, or one of those aspects. You have to start somewhere of their emotional intelligence. A lot of people start with self-awareness, and it is a good place to start. And it could be starting with what's getting for them to know their communication style, but keeping a growth mindset in their team so that their team can tell them where they're good and what they don't understand about them, and that you have that open, safe environment, because we're all on that same growth journey and there's no judgment in it.
Okay, so unfortunately we reached the end of our time. I'm very conscious that it's 45 minutes and I'll skip with that. So thank you very much, Maura. It's just been really interesting. And I think we will have to do a follow-up because I literally have a lot of questions that I wanted answers to. So the key takeaways that I wrote down at the moment, it is the first one. It is the reason for more this kind of the WRC claims. It's driven by probably a generation shift and the employment laws changing and people employers not being aware of it. And the second one, it is that getting your policies and contracts in shape right from the beginning. If you don't have it and you're being a business, just do it now. Don't wait any second more. That will help a lot and reduce a lot of headaches and expenses and so on. Third, that when WRC send you a letter, you are already in the losing or in the losing air side of it. So, and the only way to be on the winning side of it is having your policies and contracts all in place.
Yeah. And I just add to that then, Susanna, it's no good having them, that people have to know them and know, particularly the managers, they have to know them as well, and a real emphasis on the respect at work, that harassment, bullying, managers need to know that. We're just seeing that under the spotlight when it comes to cases. Yeah.
And I'm going to say, and the third one is training. Train your mind.
You got it. Yeah.
Training is going to go from one side, learning to do how you do a performance improvement, how you can actually help your team to be better. And on the flip side, to become a leader, starting with self-awareness, how I respond is the only thing that I can control. I can't control my team. I cannot push them to come to the office. I cannot push them to do something. I can influence them, want them to do things. But for that, I need to be aware of who I am. And I think having those training, it will make your life completely different, and you will be able to attract and retain the talent.
Yeah.
At the end, will protect the investment that you are doing.
Yeah. Because people leave people, not jobs. It's a cliche, but for good reason.
Yes. Maura, thank you very much. Where people can connect with you.
So Maura Hurley, maura-hurley.com is my website. You just put Maura Hurley into LinkedIn. And actually, if you're a member of Network Ireland, I'm on the mentors panel, so you can get free advice and mentoring from your membership there as well. But yeah, they're the two main places.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I will send a follow-up email with the key takeaways and Maura's details. Our next session is going to be on April the 30th. The guest speaker is Sandra Maybury, and we will talk about marketing made simple and the foundation for growth and engagement. If you have any questions, please don't be shy, just stay and ask a question. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you.